The evening air was heavy and cold, the kind that made people walk faster and keep their heads down. He was returning from work, tired and worn, his shoulders stiff from carrying the weight of the day. Being a single father had taught him how to move through life quietly, without complaint. Every step he took was for his child waiting at home, trusting him to come back with dinner and a tired smile dot as he passed an old apartment building near the edge of town. Raised voices broke the silence. At first, he tried to ignore them. Life had taught him that trouble often came uninvited. But then he heard crying. Not loud crying, but the kind that sounded held back, as if someone was trying not to be noticed. He slowed down and stopped. Near the entrance of the building stood two children. One was holding a worn backpack, its zipper half broken. The other clutched a small jacket that was too thin for the weather. Their eyes were red, faces pale, and they looked far too calm for children who should have been running or laughing at that hour. A middle-aged couple stood a few steps away, their expressions sharp and impatient. The man spoke loudly, his words cutting through the air. He said they could not keep the children anymore. He complained about expenses, about responsibility, about how life had become too difficult. The woman beside him nodded, arms crossed tightly, her face showing no warmth. She turned away from the children, as if they were strangers. The single father felt something tighten in his chest. He recognized that look on the children's faces. He had seen it once before, years ago, when he himself stood in a hospital hallway after losing his wife, holding his newborn. Unsure how to survive what came next, one of the children asked in a soft voice where they should go. The question hung in the air, unanswered. The adults offered no solution. Instead, they turned and walked back inside the building, the door closing behind them without hesitation. The children remained still, unsure what to do. People passed by, some slowing down, others pretending not to notice. No one stopped. No one spoke. He stood there longer than he meant to. His mind told him to keep walking. He barely made enough money to cover rent and food. His home was small, his life already full of responsibility. But his heart would not allow him to leave. He approached slowly, careful not to scare them. He asked if they were okay. The older one nodded, though it was clear the answer was no. The younger looked at the ground and said nothing. He asked where their parents were. The older child said their mother had passed away months earlier. Their voice shook only slightly, as if they had learned to speak about it without breaking. Their father had been gone long before that. After their mother's death, they had been sent to live with their relatives. That arrangement, it seemed, had now ended. The single father felt a wave of anger, followed by sadness. He did not ask more questions. He knew enough. He offered them food and warmth, at least for the night. He told them they could come with him, just until things were figured out. They hesitated, exchanging glances. Trust did not come easily anymore. But the cold air, the dark street, and the absence of other options pushed them forward. They nodded and followed him. His apartment was small but clean. The light flickered when he turned it on, revealing a modest space filled with signs of a quiet life. A pair of shoes by the door. A small dining table with two chairs. Toys neatly stacked in a corner. His child came running out, smiling wide. The smile faded slightly when they saw the strangers. He explained gently that they had guests for the night. His child nodded, curious but accepting, used to change and uncertainty. He warmed leftover food and divided it carefully. The children ate slowly, as if afraid the food might disappear if they rushed. He noticed how polite they were, thanking him softly, keeping their voices low as they ate. He observed them quietly. Their clothes were simple but clean. Nothing about them suggested neglect before this moment. They spoke of their mother with respect, describing her as kind, quiet, and private. They said she never talked much about her past. She had taught them to be humble and careful. That night, he gave them his child's bed and slept on the couch himself. Sleep did not come easily. His mind raced with questions. What would happen tomorrow? Would the relatives come back? Should he call someone? Was he doing the right thing? Morning came quickly. The children woke early and offered to help clean. Their sense of responsibility surprised him. Over breakfast, they asked if they were causing trouble. He assured them they were not. Later that day, the relatives did not return. No calls, no messages. It was as if the children had been erased from their lives. He took them to school to ask about enrollment, explaining the situation honestly. The staff listened with concern and offered temporary help. Papers were needed. Guardianship forms. Legal steps he did not fully understand, yet as days passed, the children remained with him. They followed rules, helped around the house, and tried hard not to be a burden. At night, he heard quiet crying through the thin walls. His own child noticed too, offering small comforts without being asked. He found a small bag among their belongings one evening. Inside were a few photographs and documents. He did not look closely then. It felt wrong, like stepping into something not meant for him yet. What he did know was this: these children had been abandoned when they needed love the most. And somehow, without planning it, he had become their shelter. He did not know that this moment, this simple choice to stop and care, was the beginning of a truth far bigger than any of them could imagine. At that point, all he knew was that he would not send them away. Not now. Not ever if he could help it. The first few days were quiet, almost too quiet. The single father watched the children carefully, noticing how they moved through the apartment as if it were a new world. Every corner, every object seemed unfamiliar, yet they treated it gently, as though it belonged to someone else they were trying not to disturb. He had expected chaos, crying, endless questions. Instead, there was silence and a strange kind of caution. It reminded him of his own childhood, when uncertainty ruled the days and small kindnesses were rare. He wondered how much these children had already learned about survival, about being careful with strangers, about hiding pain behind calm faces. His own child tried to break the ice. At breakfast, they asked the newcomers about their favorite food. One of the siblings answered hesitantly, a small smile appearing for the first time. The other remained quiet, picking at the toast. The single father could see the walls they had built around themselves, the fear of expecting care only to lose it again. School became the next challenge. He had arranged everything, but the children had grown used to uncertainty. They were polite to the teachers, but often kept to themselves. He noticed glances exchanged in class, subtle signs that they were sharing stories, memories of someone who was gone. The teachers were understanding, offering extra support, counseling sessions, and encouragement. Still, the children's eyes carried a weight beyond their years at home. The father tried to create routines. Dinner was at the same time. Homework had a designated spot, and bedtime followed a strict schedule. It was not just discipline. It was a way to create safety. Slowly, the children began to respond. The younger one started to sleep through the night without waking in tears. The older one began helping with chores, setting the table, and even helping his own child with homework. There was a quiet bonding happening, built on small gestures of trust, yet questions lingered. The siblings spoke of their mother often, sometimes in whispers, sometimes with reverence. She had been quiet, she had been private, they said. She had loved them, yes, but there were stories she had never shared, habits they had noticed but never understood. The father listened, never pushing, letting them reveal details in their own time. Something about the way they spoke, the pauses and the hesitations, hinted at secrets hidden deeply. One evening, While helping the older sibling organize their bag, he noticed something unusual. Among the folded clothes were envelopes, neatly stacked and tied with a ribbon. He paused before touching them. Privacy was important, and he did not want to betray the trust of children who had already learned caution. Yet curiosity and a sense of responsibility pulled him toward them. Carefully, he opened one envelope, finding papers that looked like financial documents, statements, and letters with foreign addresses. The children noticed and immediately reacted, a mix of fear and panic crossing their faces. They asked him not to look, pleading gently but firmly. The father closed the envelope, realizing that whatever these documents were, they were connected to the mother in ways he could not yet understand. He assured them he would not go through the rest, but his mind began working, trying to piece together what kind of life she had led before she was gone. Over the next few days, subtle clues appeared. The children occasionally spoke of trips they had taken with their mother, places that seemed far more luxurious than their current life. One mentioned attending special events. Another spoke of people in suits and foreign accents. At first, he assumed exaggeration, the way children often fill gaps in their memories with imagination. But the consistency of the stories made him pause. The in-laws remained silent. They had no contact with the children after leaving them in his care. Calls went unanswered. He had no way to question them or understand their sudden harshness. Their absence was both a relief and a mystery. The children were safe, but the past they carried remained hidden. Like a locked room, he was not allowed to enter Dot at night. The apartment became quiet. The father would sit on the couch, listening to the soft breathing of the three children. He thought about his own child and the struggles he had faced, the nights spent worrying, the moments when he questioned whether he could continue. Now, with 3 lives depending on him, the weight had grown, but so had his determination. Love, he realized, was not a limited resource. It multiplied when given freely. One afternoon, while walking back from school, the older sibling mentioned their mother in a tone that made him stop in his tracks. They said, almost casually, that she had always kept things secret, even from them. They did not know why, they admitted, but she had never wanted anyone to know about her life outside the home. The father kept his reaction calm, masking the sudden surge of curiosity and concern. He asked gentle questions, learning only what they felt comfortable sharing. She had worked hard, she had traveled, she had connections and opportunities, but she had chosen to keep them hidden. It was her way of protecting her children. She had explained in her own quiet way. He realized the challenge ahead was more than providing food and shelter. It was helping these children navigate a world they had never fully known, understanding a mother they had only partially understood, and preparing for a future they might not even imagine. It was a delicate balance between protection and discovery, between guidance and letting them find their own path. In the meantime, he focused on daily life. Homework was completed, meals were shared, and laughter slowly returned in small doses. The younger sibling began to smile more openly, responding to jokes and playful gestures. The older one, who had been distant, started joining in on simple games, showing flashes of the child he had once been before the weight of loss and abandonment settled in. The father also noticed the children's resilience. Despite everything, they had manners, they had patience, and they had a quiet strength that amazed him. It was the kind of strength that did not need to be loud to be seen. It reminded him of his own child, and he felt a mixture of pride and hope that together they could build a life filled with trust and love. Then came a quiet evening when the children shared a memory that made him pause. They spoke of their mother visiting a faraway place, speaking a language they barely understood, and meeting people who seemed important and serious. They mentioned gifts and notes left for them, things that suggested she had planned for a future she knew she would not see. The father listened, heart heavy with curiosity and awe, realizing that their mother's secretive life was far richer and more complex than he had imagined. He decided to tread carefully. Patience would be key. The children needed stability, not more questions, not more confusion. He focused on routines, consistency, and small gestures that created a sense of home. Every night he tucked them in, reminding them that they were safe, that they were loved, and that no one would abandon them again. Over time, small routines turned into habits. Dinner was met with quiet conversation and laughter. Homework became a shared activity. Bedtime stories were read, and occasionally the mother's memory was shared, not as a ghost of sadness, but as a figure of love and guidance. The children began to open up, slowly revealing parts of their personality, interests, and talents that had been hidden for too long. He could see it in their eyes, a shift from caution to trust, from silence to gentle conversation. The apartment, once quiet and tense, became a place of life and warmth. Each day was not without challenge, but every challenge was met with patience, care, and understanding. Yet, in the back of his mind, he could not ignore the strange hints of the mother's life. The documents, the stories, the glimpses of luxury and travel, all pointed to something beyond their current understanding. He knew the truth would not remain hidden forever, and when it came to light, it would change everything. But for now, he focused on the present, on the children's well-being, and on the small victories that came with building trust in family. And so, days turned into weeks. The single father and his 3 children moved forward, step by step, finding comfort in each other. Their past was complicated and their future uncertain, but within the walls of their small home, love began to take root. It was quiet, steady, and real, a bond built on kindness, trust, and the simple but profound understanding that, no matter what, they would face life together. The small apartment had become a place of quiet stability, but the single father could not ignore the documents he had found weeks earlier. They sat neatly in a drawer, unopened, waiting for the right moment. He had respected the children's wishes not to look, but a sense of responsibility had begun to grow. These papers belonged to their mother, and perhaps understanding them could help protect the children in ways he could not yet imagine. One rainy afternoon, the father decided to revisit the documents. He spread them carefully across the small kitchen table. There were letters, legal papers, bank statements, and what looked like business contracts from different countries. At first glance, he felt a mix of confusion and awe. This was not the life of a simple woman as he had imagined, nor of the modest household she had left behind. Her life was vast, complicated, and hidden from the children until now. He started to piece together small hints, addresses in foreign cities, official letters from companies, even invitations to events he had never heard of. Each document told a story of a life lived far beyond the walls of their home. She had wealth, influence, and connections that the children had never known existed. Yet she had chosen to keep them secret, to raise her children in simplicity and love rather than in luxury and attention. His curiosity was tempered with caution. He did not want to alarm the children, nor did he want to expose them to something that could overwhelm them. But he also knew the truth could not stay hidden forever. The children deserved to know who their mother truly was, even if it came slowly and carefully. The older sibling noticed him looking through the papers and approached cautiously. "Are you going to find out everything?" they asked, their voice a mix of curiosity and fear. "I'm just trying to understand," he replied gently. "I want to make sure we can protect what's yours." They hesitated, then nodded. They trusted him, the way children do when someone has proven themselves safe. Together, they started going through some of the papers. Slowly, small revelations came to light. Their mother had investments, properties, and businesses registered under her name. There were legal trusts set up for the children. as if she had anticipated a future where they might need care beyond their immediate family. The younger sibling was fascinated by the idea that their mother had been more than what they had known. "I didn't know she had all this," they whispered. "Why didn't she tell us?" "She wanted to protect you," the father explained. Sometimes adults make choices to keep children safe, even if it means hiding parts of their life. The revelation sparked a mixture of emotions: pride, confusion, awe, and even a little sadness. They had lost their mother, and now they were learning that she had lived a life far more extraordinary than they could have imagined. The father watched them carefully, noting how their eyes lit up with wonder and how their expressions shifted from worry to curiosity. Over the next few days, they explored more carefully, keeping some of the documents hidden for future understanding. They did not want to rush, knowing that too much truth at once could be overwhelming. Yet the fragments of knowledge created new questions. Why had the in-laws cast them out if their mother had wealth? Why had they remained silent about her life? The father began to research quietly, using public records and professional advice to understand what he could without causing alarm. He discovered that the mother had set up trusts and accounts specifically to ensure her children were cared for, even if they were separated from family or guardians. There were instructions for education, health care, and even travel opportunities. It became clear that her intention had been to give her children the freedom to live safely, without relying on anyone who might not have their best interests at heart. He shared some of this with the older sibling, careful to frame it as information, not a story to impress. "Your mother made sure you would have options," he said. "She wanted you to be safe and cared for, no matter what." The sibling listened, eyes wide, processing the reality that their mother had thought of every detail. There was a sense of comfort in that knowledge, a reminder that even in her absence, she had worked to protect them. Yet, the question of the in-laws lingered. The father could not ignore that they had abandoned these children, even knowing of the mother's resources. The anger simmered quietly, but he focused on the children's well-being rather than confrontation. He knew that revealing too much conflict could destabilize the fragile sense of safety they had begun to build. Evenings became a time for careful conversation. He would explain small pieces of what their mother had done, stories that highlighted her care and foresight rather than wealth alone. They talked about her kindness, her thoughtfulness, and the way she had planned for them quietly. The children began to understand that their mother's life was more than the small world they had known. Yet it was not meant to overshadow their own growing experiences and independence. The father also noticed changes in the children's behavior. The older sibling seemed more confident, speaking up in school, asking questions about the world beyond their neighborhood. The younger sibling, inspired by the stories of careful planning and adventure, became more curious and engaged. Both were beginning to see that their mother's hidden life did not mean they had missed out. It meant they had been protected and that opportunities awaited them. When the time was right, one afternoon, while organizing the documents, he found a letter addressed to him in their mother's handwriting. It was brief, but filled with instructions and reassurance. She had trusted him to care for the children, to guide them with patience, and to protect them from harm. Reading it, he felt a mixture of gratitude and responsibility. He was not just caring for 3 children, no. He was honoring the trust of someone who had believed in him enough to leave her most precious treasures in his hands. The discovery also brought clarity. The mother had not hidden her life out of shame or fear, but out of love. She had known that wealth and influence could attract attention, both good and bad, and she had wanted her children to grow up with stability and grounding before encountering those forces. The father admired the wisdom and foresight, recognizing that her choices had shaped not only their past, but their future. As the days turned into weeks, small preparations began. The father researched educational programs, potential travel, and ways to secure the children's inheritance without causing disruption. Each step was cautious, deliberate, and guided by the principle of putting the children's emotional well-being first. During quiet evenings, they would sit together, the children asking questions about their mother, about the places she had visited, and about the people she had met. He answered honestly, without exaggeration, framing the stories as lessons about resilience, care, and careful planning. The children listened, sometimes wide-eyed with amazement, sometimes thoughtful and reflective. Through it all, the bond between the father and the children deepened. They had come into his life by chance, but they were no longer strangers. They were family. They laughed together, shared meals, and found comfort in routines. The revelations about their mother's hidden life became part of their shared story, a thread that connected past, present, and future. Yet, there was a quiet understanding that the world outside was complex. The in-laws could still pose challenges, and the discovery of the mother's wealth and connections would likely attract attention eventually. But within the walls of the apartment, love and care created a safe space where questions could be asked, and truths could be revealed gradually. The father looked at the children one evening, noticing how much they had grown in just a few weeks. The older sibling had learned to laugh more freely. The younger had started to express curiosity without fear. They were learning that their mother's life, hidden though it had been, was not a source of fear or greed, but a foundation of love and protection. And so, life continued. The documents were carefully preserved, the stories shared gently, and the children slowly began to understand the depth of their mother's foresight. They did not yet know everything, but they knew enough to feel pride, safety, and hope. The father, too, grew in ways he had not expected. Caring for these children, helping them navigate both loss and revelation, and honoring their mother's secret life had taught him patience, empathy, and resilience. He realized that the future would hold challenges, but together they could face them, guided by love, trust, and the quiet wisdom left behind by someone who had cared deeply. Even in absence, life had settled into a rhythm, but the quiet stability was about to face a challenge. The in-laws, who had abandoned the children, suddenly reappeared. They claimed to be concerned, asking to see the children and questioning why they had been taken in by the single father. Their voices were sharp, their expressions insistent, and there was a tension that filled the small apartment immediately. The father remained calm, refusing to allow anger to control his actions. He knew that these people had left the children without thought or care, and now they returned only after discovering that the mother's hidden life might bring wealth or status. The children, sensing the tension, clung quietly to him, their eyes wide with apprehension. The in-laws demanded answers, wanting to know why they had not been informed, why the children were living with him, and what he had discovered about the mother's life. The father replied steadily, explaining that the children's safety had been his priority, and that any information about their mother's life would be shared when appropriate. The adults did not like his tone, sensing that they were losing control. The children listened, unsure how to react. The older sibling asked quietly if they would have to return, and the father shook his head. He reassured them that no one could take them away without proper legal action, and that he would protect them. The younger sibling clung to him, feeling both fear and relief. The situation quickly escalated when the in-laws began to hint at the mother's wealth. They spoke of opportunities, inheritance, and access to her resources, their greed thinly veiled behind concern. The father recognized the danger immediately. These people had no interest in the children themselves. They wanted the assets their mother had carefully protected. He knew he had to act with both caution and determination. The first step was to contact a lawyer who could advise on guardianship and protect the children's inheritance. Legal paperwork had to be prepared, and evidence of the in-laws' neglect would become crucial. Every step was measured, Every decision weighed with the children's safety and well-being in mind. The children observed everything. The older sibling, though young, was aware of the tension and the potential threat. They had already begun to understand the complexity of the adult world and the importance of careful choices. Their questions were thoughtful, cautious, and sometimes filled with worry. But the father responded with honesty and reassurance. Days passed, and the in-laws grew impatient. They tried to pressure the father into sharing information or giving access to the children, but he remained firm. The lawyer advised patience and preparation. Evidence of neglect, abandonment, and the mother's careful planning would speak louder than words. The in-laws' aggression and greed would ultimately reveal their true motives. Meanwhile, life in the apartment continued, though under a shadow of tension. The children tried to maintain normal routines, schoolwork, meals, and bedtime. The father emphasized stability, encouraging them to continue their activities, reminding them that the home they had built together was safe. They slowly regained a sense of normalcy, finding comfort in small routines and shared moments of laughter and conversation. The legal process began. Documents were filed, statements collected, and the children's needs presented clearly. The mother's trusts, carefully prepared and secured, provided strong support. The court recognized the father as the responsible guardian, acknowledging his consistent care, patience, and commitment to the children's welfare. The in-laws' neglect became evident, their demands increasingly unreasonable. During this time, the children discovered new aspects of their mother's hidden life. Letters, journals, and carefully saved documents revealed her planning for education, safety, and future opportunities. The father shared these pieces selectively, ensuring the children understood that her secrecy was motivated by love, not deception. They felt pride, respect, and gratitude toward her, recognizing the depth of her foresight. The court hearings were tense. The in-laws attempted to portray themselves as concerned relatives, but the evidence of abandonment and their disregard for the children's well-being was clear. Witnesses from school and the father's community testified about the care and attention he had provided. The contrast between his dedication and their neglect was striking, leaving no doubt as to who had the children's best interests at heart. Through it all, the father remained composed. He focused on the children, answering their questions gently, explaining what was happening in terms they could understand. He reminded them that they were safe, that their mother had protected them even in her absence, and that together they could face any challenge. The children began to feel empowered, understanding that love and dedication could overcome fear and greed. Finally, the court ruled in favor of the father. He was granted full guardianship, and the mother's trusts were confirmed as intended for the children's benefit. The in-laws' attempts to gain control were denied. Justice had been served, not only in legal terms, but in the acknowledgement of love, care, and responsibility over selfish motives. The children were relieved. Their sense of security returned fully, knowing that they would continue to be cared for by someone who loved them without conditions. They began to embrace the routines again, schoolwork, play, and shared family moments taking priority over fear and uncertainty. The father felt a profound sense of relief, recognizing that his dedication and patience had ensured their safety and future. In the following days, the family reflected on the experience. They spoke of the mother, her hidden life, and the lessons she had left behind. They understood that wealth was not just about money, but about planning, protection, and foresight. They realized that the in-laws' greed had only highlighted the value of the mother's careful choices and the father's unwavering care. The father encouraged the children to explore opportunities that had been prepared for them. Education, travel, and personal growth became the focus. They learned to navigate the complexities of a world that included wealth, influence, and responsibility, always guided by the principles of kindness, patience, and integrity. Through this journey, the bond between father and children strengthened. They had faced fear, uncertainty, and the revelation of hidden truths, and had come through stronger, wiser, and more connected. Each day became a step forward, a step toward understanding, healing, and growth. In the quiet moments, the father often reflected on the journey. The challenges had been immense, yet the rewards were immeasurable. He had discovered his own capacity for patience, courage, and love. The children had learned resilience, trust, and the importance of careful guidance. Together, they were building a life rooted not in fear, greed, or secrecy, but in love, protection, and the quiet power of family. The in-laws were no longer part of their daily lives. Their influence diminished and their greed exposed. The children's mother remained a guiding presence, her wisdom and foresight shaping their path even in absence. The father understood that their story was not just about survival or inheritance, but about the strength of love, the courage to protect, and the importance of building a foundation that could withstand challenges. The family continued to move forward, each day a mixture of learning, growing, and healing. They cherished the stability they had created and celebrated the quiet victories that came with trust, care, and shared experiences. The past had been difficult, but the future was full of promise, guided by the principles of love, honesty, and resilience. And through it all, they remained together, stronger for the trials they had faced and ready to embrace whatever came next. The court's decision brought relief, but life was far from over. The single father understood that legal victory was only the beginning. Raising 3 children, each carrying memories of loss and secrecy, required patience, understanding, and an endless supply of love. He resolved to focus on building a life where they could heal and grow together. The children adjusted gradually. Mornings began with shared routines, breakfast, school preparation, and small conversations that helped them reconnect with normalcy. The older sibling had started to embrace responsibility, helping with chores and schoolwork. The younger one showed curiosity and playfulness, a spark returning that had dimmed in the face of loss and neglect. The father also made time to talk about their mother's life. He did so gently, revealing small pieces of her story each day. She had been extraordinary, he explained, not because of wealth alone, but because of the care she had taken to protect her children and prepare for their future. The children listened with a mixture of pride and wonder, learning that their mother's secrecy was a form of love, a way to keep them safe. Together, they explored the opportunities that the mother had prepared. Educational programs, art classes, and music lessons became part of their lives. The father encouraged curiosity and learning, always ensuring that the children felt safe and supported. For the first time in a long while, they could imagine a future shaped by choice rather than circumstance. The apartment, once quiet and tense, now buzzed with energy. There were moments of laughter, small arguments, and shared stories. They celebrated small victories, like good grades, new friends, and completed projects. Every shared meal and bedtime story strengthened the bonds between them, reminding the father that love, stability, and attention mattered more than wealth or status. The father also began preparing for the practical aspects of their lives. He consulted financial advisors to manage the mother's trusts responsibly, ensuring that the children would have access to resources without the dangers of mismanagement or exposure to those who had once tried to take advantage of them. Every decision was guided by the principle of care and protection. The children, in turn, began to understand the importance of responsibility. The older sibling took pride in learning about finances, planning, and managing small projects. The younger one learned the value of patience, empathy, and creativity. Both were growing into individuals shaped by love, guidance, and the lessons of resilience they had learned from their mother and father. Occasionally, The father shared memories of their mother, stories that highlighted her kindness, foresight, and courage. These stories became a bridge between past and present, allowing the children to honor her memory while embracing their own lives. They learned that love could endure even in absence, and that family was built not just on blood, but on care, trust, and shared experience. The world outside remained complex. Occasionally, reminders of the in-laws or other distant family members emerged, but the children were prepared. They knew their father would protect them, and they understood their mother's intention to keep them safe from those who had not acted in their best interests. Each challenge reinforced their understanding of love, loyalty, and courage. School became a place of growth and confidence. The older sibling excelled in subjects that required critical thinking, while the younger one discovered a talent for art and music. The father encouraged them to pursue their interests, supporting their passions without pressure. He had learned that nurturing their individual strengths was as important as providing stability. They also began to participate in community activities, slowly building friendships and connections outside the home. The father encouraged social interaction, helping the children feel part of a wider world. They learned that trust and kindness could be extended beyond the apartment walls, that people could care for one another without expecting anything in return. One evening, the father took the children to a small park. They sat together on a bench, watching the sunset. The older sibling asked quietly about the mother's life, about the places she had visited and the people she had known. The father shared what he could, emphasizing that her choices were always motivated by love. The children listened, feeling pride and a sense of belonging to a story much larger than themselves. The younger one spoke of dreams, to travel, to learn new languages, and to explore the world. The father smiled, realizing that their mother's foresight had not only protected them, but also provided the freedom to dream. He encouraged them to pursue these dreams, reminding them that their family's strength came from love, not fear or greed. Over time, small routines became traditions. Family dinners with shared stories, weekend outings, and quiet evenings reading together created a sense of belonging and continuity. The apartment, once a temporary shelter, became a true home. Each child had space for their own growth, while being supported by a father who loved them unconditionally. The father also reflected on his own growth. Caring for these children had taught him patience, resilience, and the depth of his own capacity for love. He had learned that family was not limited to what one was born into, but was defined by care, commitment, and trust. His life had been changed as much as theirs, and he embraced this new chapter with gratitude. The children, in turn, began to understand the importance of kindness, responsibility, and empathy. They learned to value relationships, to communicate openly, and to navigate challenges with courage and thoughtfulness. They understood that their mother's hidden life was not something to envy, but a foundation upon which they could build their own futures. As months passed, the family celebrated milestones, birthdays, academic achievements, and small personal victories. Each celebration reinforced their bond, reminding them of how far they had come. They were no longer defined by loss or abandonment, but by resilience, love, and the quiet strength of family. Through it all, the father emphasized the principles that had guided them from the beginning: honesty, kindness, and dedication. The children learned that real wealth was not measured in money alone, but in the care and commitment one showed to others. They understood that security, trust, and love were the most valuable treasures they could inherit. In the evenings, they often spoke of dreams and plans. Travel, education, and personal growth became central to their vision of the future. The father encouraged them to think broadly, to imagine possibilities, and to embrace opportunities without fear. He reminded them that their mother had prepared for this, leaving behind tools to navigate life confidently. Finally, there came a moment of quiet reflection. Sitting together in their living room, the children shared what they had learned about resilience, love, and family. They acknowledged the sacrifices their mother had made, the challenges they had faced, and the strength they had gained. The father listened, filled with pride and gratitude for the journey they had shared. Their story had begun in hardship, with loss, abandonment, and secrecy. Yet, through patience, courage, and unwavering love, they had built a life defined by connection, safety, and hope. They had discovered that family could be chosen, that love could endure, and that resilience was a gift cultivated through care and trust. And so, life continued. The father and children moved forward together, creating memories, embracing opportunities, and building a future that honored the past while celebrating the present. The challenges they had faced were not forgotten, but they no longer defined them. Instead, they became a foundation upon which the family could grow, stronger, wiser, and more united than ever before.